just because we've had a behavioral response, and this is super key in the language, okay? Just because we've had a behavioral reaction to a particular situation doesn't mean that that behavioral reaction is bad, doesn't mean that that behavioral reaction is wrong. The question that we're trying to figure out is it effective for us to be the person that we want to be? Does it help us to be the person in the environment that we want to be, to treat people the way that we want to treat them, to be treated the way that we want to be treated? Is it effective for us to have this behavioral response? So, first of all, we've got to know what that behavioral response is. So, without the ability to self-reflect and self-analyze, we're not going to see those behavioral responses. So,
Can I ask you one, Stephen, just to explore it?
yeah,
Is because I think it's a great three-branch question when you're talking about not just the effectiveness of the outcome, but who do I want to be? Who does this,
yeah,
how do I want to be received by people? How do I want to be received by myself? Let's think of a bully. Let's think of a person who's got an aggressive personality and it's working. I throw my weight around, I push my weight, and I get what I want. Why should I change? And then you ask the question of, is this effective to be who you want to be? Well, I'm getting what I want. Do you have everything you want? Are you happy? Well, no, I'm a little lonely.
or is
I'm
is is what you've got how you want to be? So, you can talk about it from the perspective of substance use.
sure.
A person who uses substances, the use of that particular substance is incredibly effective to get what I want in the moment. And this is the problem with instant gratification, right? In the moment, the behavioral response that we have in the short term is going to be effective. So whether you're talking about the bully, whether you're talking about somebody who uses substances to cope or processes to cope, which bullying is a process, but whichever behavioral responses that we're using, it's going to be effective in the short term. We have to acknowledge that right off the bat. Okay, and this is when we go back to the problem with instant gratification. So, um, instantly rewarding behavioral responses are usually ineffective for us to live the life we want to live and be the person we want to be in the bigger picture. Not always. Sometimes an instantly rewarding behavioral response is an effective thing for me to do. So, for example, if I'm in a dangerous situation and the short-term effective response to me right now is to get angry at the people around me, to push them away from me because I need to confront this situation and push them away. That's an instantly rewarding behavioral response to a situation that is completely effective for me to keep myself safe, live the life I want to live, and be the person that I want to be. What we're looking at, though, in the bigger picture is if we're constantly using that behavioral response with a rigid perspective that it's the only thing I can do when I feel the way that I feel, it's usually ineffective for us to live the life we want to live and be the person that we want to be in the areas of life that are important to us, because it impacts other people and impacts ourselves in a way that just keeps those maladaptive behaviors going and causes us to stay stuck in particular emotional experiences. It's a shitload of information that I just threw at you.
No, but it's a lot. Here's the thing about it, Stephen, is I love it, first of all, but I think a lot of it comes like the term self-analysis, not others' diagnosis.
Yeah.
And it's easy for me to point, I know I'm guilty of this, to point at other people who are behaving in that way and saying, you need to get yourself some help. When in actuality, it's my experience of their behavior that's causing me to
Yeah.
think they need to get help. But it's what can I do for myself to help myself with that type of thinking? You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like, and I love that, like you're saying, it's the first it takes the wanting and the willingness, the recognition that there is parts of my personality that I'd like to work with. And then the acceptance that they aren't wrong or flawed. They're just doing things in an ineffective, the language you're using, an ineffective response for me to be the person I want to be. So being able to have that kind conversation, I guess, with myself and
Passion. Yeah.
yeah, compassionate conversation, and for lack of a better terms, try to reparent myself. It's okay, and change my language. Go ahead, Stephen. Why don't you like that language?
Yeah. I'm a little bit cautious of reparenting, um, because I prefer to kind of shift that language into re-educating. Um, Parenting, using that type of language can lead to some pretty rigid emotional reactions to it. I know Marsha Linehan herself doesn't like the term reparenting. It is a term that's used in schema therapy, so I know that I'm integrating the two. And one of the things that I try to say to people quite a bit is, when you come to the groups that I do and look at the stuff that I do online, because I'm integrating DBT and schema therapy, you are going to see some differences in language, different terms and things like that, because I found in my experience with working with people that using the term reparenting can lead to a bit of a pushback. It's the only reason that I say that.
Is that because of the relationship they've had with their own parents?
Usually, yeah.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I get that.
So it's more of a, I'm looking at, there is a part of my personality that is that has a really black and white rigid perspective on what it is that it needs to do when there is an emotional experience in my system. So there's a part of me that believes when I'm afraid, I have to get angry and yell at you to get you to listen to me because I feel like you're not understanding my perspective. And it's got this rigid point of view that as soon as that feeling comes in and that story is activated, that this is what I have to do. So looking at that dialectically means recognizing that there is a part of my personality that feels this way. And I want to try to, first of all, validate it so that it feels like it's heard and understood, so that I can educate it on the impact of what it's doing, as well as how it can do things differently. Okay, so we're going to get into that obviously as we go through the skills. But just often if we look at it from a parenting perspective, there can be a lot of pushback because, sometimes people will say, it leads to a lot of anger because, well, my parents should have done this, or there's not a good relationship with parenting internally. So I prefer to look at it from a perspective of educating, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I like the switch in language. I didn't even think of the last part of what you were saying, not just about the prior experience that you've had with your parents, or maybe the future one you may hold, because I'm using this like, you know what, I'm going to talk to my mom about this because she should have been reparenting me. Yeah, I can imagine. Something when you were talking about the education, sorry, got a frog in my throat there. When you're talking about the re-education, the thing I was thinking about takes me to that kind of demanding inference in that if you're not listening to me, you should. Like that as though you should be listening to me, right? Not that you're not listening to me, but the actual demand in that you should. Is that something I'm trying to work on when it comes to my education, or is it just how I'm going about communicating my demands?
Yeah, and I think I want to be careful that we don't get into something that we're going to talk about in a later video. So when we're looking at the language, we're going to try to work on the way that language is kicking in, particularly if it's coming from an internal critic. But first things first, we need to be able to recognize the language when it's there. We need to be able to understand that we're having a reaction to something that's happening in our system. And usually this starts with hindsight awareness. The clip you just watched was taken from the upcoming podcast, A Conversation for Liberation. If you like the content of this clip, please subscribe to the channel, smash that like button and turn on the notifications so you can stay up to date with when each full episode gets released. As always, if you want to know more about what we do at the Liberation Place, come join the live online meetings that I facilitate each week for free on Zoom. I'll leave a link to the page containing more information about these groups in the description below. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you again soon. Take care, be safe and be well.